We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. All right, BraveCo men, welcome back. This week, I'm super excited. I have one of my best friends, Chris Lamm, with me. Chris, thank you so much for coming, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this episode, man, I'm so excited about. Chris is a mortgage lender, very successful mortgage lender. You're also an entrepreneur, which means that you make money, and you're a family man. You have 3 kids, 3 adopted kids, which is so awesome, bro.
Yeah.
And a beautiful wife, Heather, that he doesn't deserve.
It's true.
Yeah.
I don't mind it.
No, it is true. And just a crazy story. And so I'm really excited to have you on here because your life is really a story of someone who has come out of the ashes, bro, and risen to like a radical place of success financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and the stuff that you've overcome it's just so like, man, it's crazy. And so I wanted to bring you on here and first just talk about your life. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? What was life like for you as a kid?
Yeah. Well, I grew up, I'm a local guy, so a lot of people are surprised when they hear that because there's so many people here from all over the place. But I grew up in a small town called Cottonwood. It's like 20 miles south of here. And single parent household. My parents divorced probably around the time I was 5, and my mom just worked. You know, she did a great job, but she was all work all the time. So my brothers and I were kind of left to figuring out a lot of life on our own. And, you know, that wasn't because she didn't do her best. It was just because of time and not having a dad around. And so growing up in Cottonwood, it was a great place to grow up. We had a lot of fun. That's where I got into fishing and hunting. But it's also where, you know, I learned to find identity through drugs, alcohol, and hanging around with people that were doing what I wanted to do. And so I think that, you know, the first time I started getting into partying was probably around 12 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, I got sober at 19. In fact, next month will be 20 years I've been sober. But the reason I got sober at 19 is because I started at 12. And so at 12 years old, I started experimenting. And growing up, I remember that I always felt like I had this hole in my soul or this hole in me. And I just felt, you know, insecure, always getting in fights at school, which, you know, later I learned I needed to find a better way because I wasn't exactly a big guy.
You're not the biggest guy.
5'6". MMA is probably out for me.
Yeah.
But I always just felt this, you know, this feeling that I just didn't measure up, and I had to overcompensate. And so for me, when I found drugs and alcohol, you know, it was almost like finding God.
Wow.
I mean, it filled this part of me that I felt needed to be filled. And for a while, it was a lot of fun. I was able to have confidence. I was able to talk to girls. I was able to hang out with the cool people and not have this fear all the time. And so, you know, that's how addiction for me really started, was finding this false sense of confidence and identity through drinking, and it always led to drugs for me too, because it started with alcohol, but around the time that I was going to school, there was a lot of guys smoking weed, and back when weed was a drug. I don't know if you remember that time.
I think they have it in the nutritional value.
Yeah,
now.
It's at Walgreens now on every counter, but
it's on the pyramid.
When I was in school, you could go to jail for smoking weed, and so it was actually a drug.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, that was really the lifestyle. And I tell people I talk to all the time, I go to juvenile hall and talk to kids. I don't lie to them. I tell them it was fun. I had a good time. But just like anything that isn't real, I started having problems. And, So I get into high school, and by this time I have a host of friends. I never had a hard time making friends again. I could hang out with anybody. And I was that guy in school that could hang out with every crowd and have a good time because I replaced my bad boy fighting, person that didn't work with the class clown and the guy that was always fun to hang around with. And
bro, that's the better guy to be. If you're only going to be one or the other, do you know what I mean? Like the guy that's kicking everyone's butt or getting your butt kicked, or the class clown. Yeah. Hang out with everyone.
The stakes are not as high being funny than they are fighting because,
totally.
You got to learn to fight. You got to be pretty big.
True.
So, was having fun. And at some point it became an everyday thing for me where, we were drinking after school. We were, smoking weed at school.
Your brothers too?
My brother too. My big brother, Chemo, we have, our family's mostly Hawaiian. He had moved out because he had a different dad when I was younger, and I didn't see him but maybe a few times through high school. He would come back from Oahu and visit, but he was totally an addict because addiction is a lot of it's genetic. And, there's a lot of different ways people say it's spiritual and it's strongholds, but a lot of times if you have it, you can look at your brothers and sisters, your grandparents, you can see that it exists in your family. For me, I didn't have to look far. My uncle died of a heroin overdose about 20 years ago. And my brother, Chemo, lives on the streets today. And, he's totally been completely addicted.
Now, you have a younger brother as well?
I have a younger brother named Steven, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Steven and I were really kind of doing the same things with the same people together during this whole time.
And where was your dad?
So, that's kind of a long story, but the short of it is the dad who was there when I was born divorced with my mom probably around the time I was 5 because he was an alcoholic, totally abusive. It was crazy. And I didn't find out till I was about 12 that he was actually my adopted dad. And my real dad was this nameless guy that I had never heard about until, my brothers were joking around one day because they knew the family secret and I didn't. I found out I don't know if I ever told you that before, but yeah. So, side story, I met my biological dad last year for the first time.
Right. I remember that.
So anyways.
So wait, can we just go back there though?
Absolutely.
Like you're living in a home and you're living with a guy that you think's your dad for all these years.
Yep.
And then you find out that everyone knows but you that it's not your dad.
Yeah.
At what age?
I think I was 12. Yeah.
What happened to you when you found out?
We were in Kansas because he lived in Kansas and had a farm, and we would visit every summer after the divorce. And I think my brother called me a bastard, and my cousins were there and they were all laughing about it. And it was probably the third time I heard it. And I knew that there was something there. So I asked my dad at the time, and I they told me, and my mom told me, and I remember the feeling, it was a really bad day. It was a lot of betrayal. And, I've adopted kids. You just mentioned that. And one of the things they teach you when you adopt kids is that you want to tell them the story, the adoptive story, as early as they can comprehend it, that you have a birth mom and we're your parents, because it is so traumatic for someone to hear something like that at such a young age. Or in my case, an older age. So yeah, it was a really rough thing. There was a lot of betrayal. That was the last time I ever went back.
I bet.
Yeah, I never went back after that. So yeah, that was part of the story.
It's so interesting because kids, we have such a innate biological wiring to know who our parents are and to long for them. I've just watched it so much. I've counseled so many different kids whose dads left them or moms or who's abandoned them. And it's so painful when you bond to somebody that you didn't know was your dad this whole time, right? And then you feel so lost because we're always trying to figure out, who am I? Who am I really? And we look at our parents as like this mirror, this like reflection of who I'm going to become, good or bad. And it just feels like such a cruel thing to have gone through and really painful.
Yeah, it was. And I don't think I had language for it
Yeah.
for a long time. In fact, really just the last decade have I started unpacking what actually happened. But it was definitely the tailwind that I needed to run even further into the lifestyle I had.
So you were already into alcohol?
I was. At that time, I would say I was dabbling. But that was definitely part of the pain and the identity problem and just all the things that addicted people usually deal with, because drugs and alcohol aren't ever really the problem. They're just the medication and the symptom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was around the time of 12. And from that point on, and again, I didn't know this until recently because it's something that I'm still reflecting and gaining perspective from. But from that point on, I was really on the search for finding those father figures in my life. And at the time, because of how I was raised, a father figure was someone who was basically present and usually a womanizer.
Someone sleeping with your mom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And so, and that was okay with me because at the time, like, I didn't know anything different.
Yeah.
And, going back to where I grew up in Cottonwood, my friends and I start hanging out and we're having a great time. And we started experimenting with drugs because around that time in the 90s, the rave scene was really big.
Oh yeah.
And I don't even know if you know this about me, but one of my closest friends, Jose, was a DJ, and I loved music. And so, one time we were talking and I went to his house and I saw him spinning records and playing house music, and I really liked it. And it wasn't all because of the drugs. I actually really liked that music. You know that because I play it in the morning when we work out. And so I ended up buying some turntables. But before we get to that story, this was around 17, and I was drinking every day, using drugs, and I was at a wedding one time, and I was on a motorcycle with a friend, and we were both drinking, no helmets. And he ended up getting up to 75 miles an hour. I know because I looked around him sitting on the back, because I felt like we were going a little too fast to be on a motorcycle without helmets, drunk. And he ended up laying it down. He instantly died. And I went to the hospital and almost died too. And this was at 17. And
bro, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's probably a few things you'll gather.
I feel like this is confession time.
No, it's nice. It's nice to sit down and get to know you a little bit better.
Bro, your friend died.
Yeah, he did. So we were going around this corner, and I don't know how it happened. I must have been carried by angels or something, but there was this curb, then there was railroad ties with this giant rope, and then there was a lawn, and somehow I did not hit the curb, I did not hit a railroad tie or the rope. I must have went over it perfectly. He hit it all, and it crushed every bone on the left side of his body. I ended up getting up and coughing. I had no clothes on. It ripped every piece of clothes I had. I went up to him, checked his pulse. That's all I knew to do, and I could tell it was bad. But yeah, this was around 17, and this was probably the first negative consequence that I had received up to this point. I mean, I had some problems, some people I owed money. There was definitely some problems, but this was my first real shaking that this is a path that is not going to end well.
Yeah.
But it was not enough.
Yeah.
And
of course.
So anyways, get out of the hospital 3 days later, of course, go straight to my friends and carry on. And I ended up getting some money from an insurance settlement. That's how I bought my first set of turntables.
No way.
Yeah. And a truck. And
from the insurance settlement from that motorcycle crash?
It was one of the worst decisions I ever made with money. I didn't know what to do. I got this windfall of money, and I was like, well, I need a car, and turntables are expensive. Mom can't afford them.
Yeah.
And I'd like to buy some clothes. So I think I spent the money in 5 days.
Yeah.
It was a lot. But I ended up becoming a DJ. I was pretty good at it. Jose showed me, and I ended up doing this DJing in high school. And so on the weekends, we're traveling to raves, DJing. And, at that time, I mean, I think it's still the same way. I mean, it's ecstasy, it's cocaine,
yeah.
It's a backpack full of Coronas, and usually a pocket full of weed. And if it's a really good night, we're probably going to take some LSD too. And that was the normal weekend for me.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. It was like balls to the wall, all in. Let's see how far we can push this.
Up all night?
Multiple nights.
Jeez.
Yeah. It was a wild, wild life. And And so, but I was having a good time. Even though I had this experience at 17, I still thought that I could control it, and I still thought that I had control. I was in the mortgage business because I got in 2001 when I was in high school. I didn't love school, ADD, and I had found out that you could work from 12 to 5 and get school credit. So I was like, this is great. I don't know why everyone isn't doing this. I can make money, didn't have a whole lot, and I don't have to go to school. And so I got in the mortgage business as a junior, and by my senior year, I'm DJing, I have a job, and I'm getting decent grades at school. I have it all together. I don't have a problem. Everything's fine. And I really thought that. But what happened for me was the consequences to my actions were coming quicker than I could lower my standards.
Yeah.
I got a DUI. I started losing jobs because I couldn't make it to work. And my addiction just really took this corner where I couldn't manage anymore. And in fact, one of the reasons that led me to my sobriety was I could not get that feeling that I felt whole any longer. In fact, the more I drank and used, the more insane I got. It just didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was a problem because for me, for the only, the main years of my young adult life, this was my identity. This was my circle of friends. This was all I knew. My entire life at the time revolved around this life, and I did not know another way. But I kept pushing. And so I graduated high school barely. Most of my friends had dropped out and got girls pregnant and went to prison. A couple of them overdosed and died and committed suicide. I mean, I was running with a pretty rough group of guys. And when I graduated, I moved out. I got an apartment the day I graduated. And within a year, I was pretty much homeless, had no more friends, had people looking for me because I owed them money. I had a friend in high school who was a counselor. Her name was Carol. Her husband was a really nice guy, a Christian man named Cliff Blankenship, and he was a sheriff in town. And most of the people that exposed me to Jesus, whether they used the words or not in my life, they loved me. Mm-hmm. And I had these people along the way that deposited encouragement, identity, and these little things into my life. And I thought about it at times, but there was a time I ran into her I don't know where I saw her, but she just said, Chris, I got to tell you that they're watching your house right now. The police were,
yeah,
because I was selling drugs and stuff. Yeah. And she said, I'm worried for you. And the way she said it, it just meant so much to me. Like, this is like one person who really cares about me. And it's not that my mom didn't, she was worried about me too, but she didn't know a lot of what was going on. And anyways, it wasn't long after that. It was July 15th, 2003, where I was driving drunk one night and I was suicidal. And I said, if you're really there, I'll do whatever you say if you help me. Because at the time,
talking to God.
Yeah. And I was completely delivered that night, but I had this really incredible experience where I realized I was loved, and because I felt so hopeless, man. It was this experience where I was so convicted by my sin and my path that I didn't think there was another way.
How did you know to reach out to God?
People along the way. There was just these people who spoke life into me, prayed for me. And I always remembered that there was something there, but I just wasn't ready to look at it. And I'd gone to church a few times, but I just never really liked church. I felt like it was very institutional and structured. And, there's just parts that I think anyone that has had those religious experiences, it's not super attractive, and unfortunately a lot of the people aren't, but I did have some amazing people from a young age that at times had prayed for me, and I'd gone to Awana. So I had this sort of foundation that was there.
Bro, Awana's was the deal back in the day.
Oh yeah.
I went to Awana's as well. Did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So fun.
I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little jewels you put in your crown. And
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, I had this experience, this awakening with the Lord where I basically had seen, he gave me a vision that was repressed I don't know how, I was probably 5 years old, and I remember consciously telling my dad that I did something on accident when I actually meant to hurt my brother.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if that was like the first time I willfully disobeyed, but from that point all the way to the current moment in that car, I had this open vision of all these disobedient, just the wrong that I had done in my life, the path that I had taken, to the point where I was like, I don't know how I can live another day. And then all of a sudden my car was just so full of this overwhelming love that, and it was as if he said to me, you don't even have to go back. You just have to, I'll take you right back to the path I had for you right now. And you don't have to worry about any of that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had with God. And up to that point, it certainly was. And, from there, I started asking people for help. I went to AA. I went to a Vineyard church, and walked up to the pastor and said, here's my story. I don't know what to do. And, people like that, they really love guys like me, because you don't see that a whole lot.
Yeah.
But I was raw and I was ready. And if you would have told me to stand on my head, and that would have helped me stay sober and have a better life and make friends and know how to live a normal life, I would have done it. So I started getting discipled by men, and they started taking me on missions trips to China and Africa. And I just started this lifestyle of having a relationship with God and being in relationship with men. And I think I was a fresh breath of air for them too, because I don't think they'd ever had someone at that time that was as real.
Yeah.
And now it's like the norm with our group.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. But when I had done that, there wasn't a whole lot of vulnerability and people just saying, I did this, and I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that was really a strength for me. And it has been to this day, the ability to tell on myself.
Yeah.
And just not worry about what people think. And just because I knew that was actually what helped me in life. And
how old were you when
I was 19
okay.
when I got sober.
Wow.
Yeah, so having some incredible experiences, spending time with people who really love me, who know everything about me and don't have any agenda. Really, they're fathers, these are people that are rewiring me and teaching me how to grow up. And I mean, I tell people all the time, I literally grew up in the last 20 years. I was washing dishes one time at this AA meeting, and this guy comes up to me, and he looks at the coffee cup, and it has a coffee stain on it. And I put it in the drain to dry. He said, what is that? And I said, I just cleaned it. He said, well, there's still coffee on it. A job worth doing is a job worth doing well. It's like these little lessons throughout that whole process from all these people that would give it to me were literally people speaking life into me and teaching me how to tell the truth. Like I used to tell fish stories. I remember the first time I corrected my first fish story, I was telling someone the fish was this big, and I said, nah, I'm joking, it was this big. And they thought I was being funny, but I was like actively learning how to be rigorously honest with people.
Yeah.
Because I realized that being honest to a fault is the only way. That you can't, and I was completely dishonest for most of my life. One of my guys early on told me being on time is being 10 minutes early. A lot of stuff that maybe most dads taught their kids, but I didn't get any of that. So I really had this group of men that took me in and just started teaching me these basic things. And, I was just dumb enough, smart enough to listen. And that was kind of the beginning for me.
Bro, it's so crazy. The power of having men in your life, right?
Yeah.
To come and bring you identity and direction and correct you. It really is phenomenal what happens when you have someone come alongside you and take care of you.
Yeah, the community, a lot of people have their opinion about AA. But the thing that I think is very special about AA is people start out with saying that I'm broken.
Yeah.
Like that's the baseline. And everyone there, the whole culture is built around helping the new guy.
Yeah.
And sharing their struggles so that new guy knows they're not alone. And I think one of the things that we're so fortunate to have in this culture is that we have that too. And because it's not, this problem that we have as men is not limited to drug addicts and alcoholics.
No.
It's all men.
Yeah.
And so, this group has been one of the first groups in my life where I've seen that culture of what I've seen in AA modeled in a circle of men that have fun and fish and hunt and deal with all the same problems anyone else does, but still, try to make the right decision, try to do the next right thing, and know that the value of talking to their brothers and like not carrying the load themselves is so important.
It's so easy to get to a place in life where you don't want to open up and show where you're at, you know? And I think in the Christian world, I mean, I grew up in the church my whole entire life, and it's like there's two different worlds inside of the Christian world. There's one where all I am is a sinner. I'll always be a sinner, right? And it doesn't matter how hard I try, I can never get that coffee stain off the cup type of deal. And then we have the complete opposite side where Christians like to hang out, which is like, I am God's chosen, God's beloved, and I'm going to hide in that identity of like, deny that there's any problems in me, deny that I need anybody else besides God, and kind of deny facts and stay in the like, God's always good, which he is, but I'm not looking at my problems, right? And it's true, man, being able to come to this baseline of I need help, God is for me. But also I got to open up to these people and really show them where I'm at and who I am, because God isn't actually all that I need. That's a myth. That's something that we made up, right? Adam is walking in the garden with God and he goes, you're missing something. Mm-hmm. You need a helpmate. You need a partner. You need someone to do life with. And so I do love AA for that reason. Mm-hmm. I think my only problem with AA actually is the identity piece that I'm always an alcoholic, or that I'm always a drug addict. And it's not even something that I would be like, oh, I'm willing to die on this hill. But for me personally, the identity piece of I am always an addict or always an alcoholic, I think is the piece that I'm like, I could leave that and just head towards like, because I do love the 12 steps.
Yeah, they're powerful.
Yeah, they are. I just taught the making amends steps to a class recently.
Did you?
Yeah, because, and not to take us off a rabbit trail, but I do think in life what happens is, especially in marriage, which I know I'm getting off on a rabbit trail, but this will be a bonus. In marriage, what happens in a lot of marriages, we spend the first 10 years of marriage not knowing what we're doing. And making all kinds of messes with our spouse and even ourselves, but our spouse and our poor behavior, our inability to create strength and consistency. And then you end up at like the 5 or the 10-year mark and you're like, okay, I'm learning communication, I'm learning connection, but so much of our past was painful, super painful for my wife. And if you haven't gone back and actually made amends for what's happened in the past, then she's still seeing you through these lenses, or you're still seeing her through those lenses. I mean, it goes both ways. And we can have the best communication in the world and you can have the best conflict resolution in the world. But if you have an old belief system because of undealt with pain that's come from your partner, it's so hard to move the marriage forward. You're stuck.
Yeah. The thing that I would say, I got so much out of the 12 steps. But I would say one of the things that I got that has been one of the most valuable things that is with me today is you're no longer a victim. So when you go back and make amends to people, of course, for me, a lot of my amends were, I legitimately made some mistakes, right? But one of the things they teach you, and I think this is all biblical too. I mean, the 12 steps actually came out of the Bible. One of the things they teach you is if you have resentment or bitterness towards someone, like even if it's 99% their fault, you have to find the 1% that you can own. Otherwise, you'll never be free of it.
Bro, it's such a blow to the ego.
It's and it's all about ego reduction so that you can live from the heart. And I think that that's something that I see so many guys that come in and like, one of the reasons why when I take the guys through the steps, when we do that 3rd step prayer, we get on our knees. There's guys that won't get on their knees. And it's fun to watch because you're seeing like their ego will not allow them to get on their knees, as if that means that they're less of a man or something like that. And so yeah, I think that the ownership piece that people get by making amends, whether they do it in AA or they find a different way to make amends, learning to own things and realize that it doesn't matter what's happened to you and who did it. You have to be free of bitterness, and you have to be free of anything and everything where you're holding something against other people. That has been something that's been so good for me, because I still make mistakes all the time, and I like to sleep good at night, and I don't want to be worrying about walking through Costco and running into somebody that I have a problem with.
Yeah.
So
you still live in Redding.
I still live in Redding.
Right next to that small little town. Yeah.
It's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
I don't care if someone did me wrong. I got to find a way to forgive them, because I want to live free, and I don't want to be holding grudges against people.
It's crazy because there's a lot of people that start where you started a lot. I say this about my story. My story is not unique in the sense that, I've gone through so much stuff for me. There's 100,000 stories that are just like mine and just like yours. But there's not a lot of people that actually walk it all the way through and get to the other side. And you did that. It's such a testimony to your ability to persevere. And it's funny, like perseverance is a fruit of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And I really do think that that's a sign of the transformation that God did in your life.
Yeah.
Your ability to go, okay, I'm not going to run back to my past, but and also I really do think that it's a testimony to having those guys come into your life.
Oh yeah.
Because
for sure,
you just couldn't have done it on your own. Even going through the 12 steps, I feel like a lot of people get into stuff like that, but they never really make connections in there, which could be their fault or whatever.
Yeah.
But having those people in your life, and maybe I'm speaking for you, but it seems like that's part of what helped you get all the way to the other side of your addiction and not relapse back into it.
Yeah, I would say I would add desperation to that. Because making amends it's not an easy thing to do. Like you said, it's a blow to the ego, and it's exposing, and it opens you up to, people giving you feedback that you may not want to hear. And so I think desperation, I think that certainly having men, I couldn't have done it without men.
Yeah.
Those are the ingredients. And that's why when I see people they have it all in life, that's the term I like to use. They've got a great marriage. They're good parents, and they're not perfect, but they seem like they're doing a great job stewarding all the blessings in their life. One of the things I notice about people like that is they stay desperate. They recognize that this could all be gone, and they try to stay on their face, metaphorically speaking, with God, and then they stay accountable to men no matter how good their life's going. In fact, the really smart ones know that when it's going at its best, they should probably pull in men more.
Yeah, it's true. So you went through, you got all the way through to a place where, okay, life's starting to do well. When did you meet your wife?
Yeah, so I got sober at 19. I got back in the mortgage business, and I thought, my relationships were broken. Okay. So I had thought, and my mentors at the time, they're like, yeah, you should probably stay single a little while. Okay. Yeah. I didn't have a problem with that. I was loving my life.
Wow.
I was hunting, I was working, I was going to everything church and vineyard conferences and listening to worship music, which I thought was super lame and cheesy up until that point in my life. And what I hoped would only be 1 year turned into about 4 years. I guess I needed a little more time. I went on 2 or 3 dates over the course of 4 years, but man, it didn't take me but maybe 1 or 2 dates when I just realized, like, this isn't it. Like, this is not the right person. And I kept, I had a lot of friends. Oh, you'll find her, and we're praying. And I'm like, I don't know, man. This is getting a little late here. I thought I would have met her by now. I'm working out. I'm like feeling like my life's going pretty good. I was like, I got a pass, but I think I'm a pretty good guy. But I really struggled to connect with a gal who I thought I could marry. And I met Heather at the gym working out. And it was not the place where I would have
Or were you like in the mirror flexing? Or
I pulled the Chris Farley thing on her. I was like, she walked by, I was like, 99, 100. That's a true story.
Was it?
Yeah. And the fact that she laughed at it and liked it, I was like, okay, we got something to work with here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I know it's the real me.
That's
so
awesome.
Anyhow, I ended up asking her for a number. She gave me the wrong number. I knew that she was on accident. Heather had never gone on a single date before I asked her out.
No way.
Yeah. She was waiting for me, I guess. So she was waiting, and she was here for Bethel in some capacity. I don't remember what. I knew that she loved the Lord, and I knew that this was just her job for the summer. And then we went and hung out in a group setting, and I learned how to do things in a healthy way. I brought her into a place where I had friends there, and we went to a show, so it wasn't uncomfortable for her. And we never stopped hanging out ever since. I mean, I asked her dad, and then asked her to marry me in about 6 months into dating, because, with all the work I had done, I didn't need to wait. I knew it. And it was right. And so we get engaged, and I get diagnosed with cancer. God. So, I'm working out. I'm as healthy as I've ever been. I mean, it's a complete 180 story. I'd lost, I used to weigh 230 pounds, and I was a lot leaner than I am now. I still have a little more of a dad bod than I'd like to have now, but I couldn't believe it. But I had some pain, and I ended up going to the doctor because a bunch of my buddies told me to. I had this pain in one of my testicles, and I kept asking my friends, I was like, hey, does your testicle feel like this? Do you have pain? Have you ever had that? Like, no, bro. Never. Like, you need to get that checked out.
Get that looked at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so finally I go to a walk-in clinic, and the doctor is like, I think this is cancer. Don't freak out. And, before I know it, I was getting operated on.
Bro, he says, I think this is cancer. Don't freak out.
He didn't say don't freak out, but he basically said, I don't want you to worry, but I believe that you have cancer, and I need to send you to a specialist, and it's probably important you see him tomorrow.
And you're engaged to be married?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
So 3 days later, I'm getting operated on, and they think they got it all. And so kind of go back to life. But 90 days later, they need to do another blood test and make sure it hasn't spread into my lymph nodes. And sure enough, in 90 days it did.
Holy
smokes. It was everywhere. So they said, well, the good news is this cancer since 1996, I believe, around the time Lance Armstrong had this cancer, they developed a drug called cisplatin, which is a platinum-based chemotherapy drug. Before that, it was 95% mortality with testicular cancer.
No way.
Yeah. This drug went from 95 to 95%. You're probably going to be okay. So the good news was, hey, you're probably going to be okay, but you're going to have to go through hell for the next 6 months, because cisplatin, I believe, is, if it's not the worst, it's in the top 3 worst chemos you can take. I mean, to this day, I wear hearing aids because it messed my hearing up. I have, blotches and a lot of stuff that is residual. So we end up getting this news, and we're starting chemo in 3 weeks. And my wife and I sat down, or like kind of making a plan. We're not living together. We're trying to plan a wedding. And our parents had planned a wedding about 2 weeks later. We didn't know it. So we ended up getting married so that we could live together through that season. We did a quick honeymoon in Mount Shasta for 2 nights and started chemo on a Monday.
Wow.
And did that thing for about 4 months.
Well, that's how you started your marriage.
Yeah. In the beginning, it wasn't too bad. They cut a hole in your chest, and then they put what's called a port. And you have basically this little device hanging out at all times where they just leave it in there for 4 months so they can put the chemo directly through the port into your heart, because it's too strong for your veins and your capillaries. It can literally erode them. And so the first week wasn't too bad, but by the 3rd round, I started feeling it. And I'll never forget the day I was combing my hair and the hair started coming out and felt horrible. But I was pretty resilient. Like, I was still working out, going to work. I mean, I had no choice. I'm newly married.
Yeah.
I don't have hardly any money. I have a house payment, and I'm self-employed. So I had my laptop, my Verizon card, because at the time there wasn't,
Yeah.
this was a while back, so a lot's changed since then. And I'm doing pre-qualifications for mortgage clients, sitting in the chemo room with all the other people who ended up becoming a bunch of my friends, and just trying to get people to do loans with me. And about 2 months in, a lot of the people that referred to me stopped. And it wasn't because I wasn't doing a good job. They thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
I don't blame them. I looked like an alien. I had no eyelashes, no eyebrows. It was not good. Like, thank God the clients didn't want to meet face to face, because it would have scared them. And I'm walking around town and everyone's looking at me like, are you okay? As they think I'm going to die. And it was a very interesting experience. So anyways, by the end of that, the way that chemotherapy works, it's compounding, right? So you have your first round, it's pretty rough. They give you about 3 weeks off, because they can't just keep doing it, because it kills everything to try to kill the bad stuff. But by the fourth round, which was the last one, I felt so bad. I told my wife, I said, if they find more and they have to do more, I don't think I can do anything else. And I was okay with it. I felt bad because it really wasn't my choice, but I felt that bad. So anyhow, 90 days goes by, we end up getting a clear bill of health, but they have to monitor you for 5 years, because cancer comes back pretty quick. But I remember that my last month of chemo, for some weird reason, I had all these loans lined up, and I closed a bunch of loans. I had my best month ever, and it was to the dollar enough to pay all my bills at home and every medical bill that I had to the dollar.
Way.
To the dollar.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, that was the beginning of our marriage. And I still owe my wife a debt that I'll never be able to repay, because I was dying. I was rotten. I was not nice to be around. I had zero sex drive. And that was something that it's ended up being an asset to our marriage,
Yeah.
because we started out our marriage with such a fight.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do part 2 of this podcast, just because I really wanted people to dive into your story and just hear where you started, and we're getting into the part of how you became financially successful. And so in part 2, we're really going to dive into how to become financially successful, because so many men have started out like you, and you have so many good practical tips to help guys get out of debt emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. But really, we don't talk a lot about money on the podcast, because it's not my strength. I mean, that's the honest truth, is I'm not the financial guru. But to have a guy like you in here that can help give guys some real practical tips is what we want to go towards. So in the next episode, we're going to cover that.
Sounds great.
Thank you for opening up and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.